Now it's time for Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about the intersection of faith and pop culture and how culturally relevant topics can be used to start conversations about your faith. I'm joined today with Rana, biochemist, friend, and someone who has a big heart for understanding the Creator, right?
Yes, I do.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to talk about science apologetics. So for people who are right-brained like me, when we think about science apologetics and just learning more about science and how that reveals the Creator, it can kind of seem like it's just head knowledge. And, you know, we're more heart and art people. So can you give us some insight on how we can use science apologetics for evangelism?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing to remember is that there are people that evidence is really very important, that 2 + 2 has to equal 4. Right. And so, you know, we read in Scripture that God has made himself known to us through the record of nature. And of course, science is the way that we study nature. And so we would expect that scientific discoveries should reveal evidence for God's fingerprints, but also for his attributes, his glory, his majesty, his faithfulness, his goodness, his love. And so we're not just getting evidence that God exists, but we're getting more than that. We're getting an insight into who the Creator is. And I think that's the bridge between those people that need evidence and are more intellectual in their pursuit of faith and those people that maybe are more driven by other factors like art and music and just a desire to emotionally connect with their Creator.
Right. Well, it was something, I was listening to a worship song called So Will I by Hillsong, and it actually made me have a deeper appreciation for what we do here at Reasons to Believe. Now, of course, we talk about science and apologetics for the purpose or for the sake of evangelism. And so when I was listening to that song, it really helped articulate what I feel about what we're doing. I'm just going to read one lyric in particular. It says, "I can see your heart in everything you've done, every part designed in a work of art called love." So can you give an example when we think about creation and you studying creation, can you give an example of how your study through science has brought you closer to the Creator and to his heart?
Well, you know, for me, it was science that brought me to the recognition that God exists and opened me up to the gospel. And what I was impressed with was just the elegance and the sophistication and the ingenuity of biochemical systems. And so there's an underlying wisdom that you see that's expressed in the way things work in nature. But there's also an incredible beauty. That's what drew me to study biochemistry to begin with, is I actually find molecules to be incredibly beautiful. They have wonderful and elegant shapes. There's a beautiful symmetry that you see in molecules. So there's a beauty that I see, and I think anybody can appreciate the beauty of creation, whether you understand that beauty in more scientific terms or understand it more artistically. And so to me, it's that evidence that goes from God's existence to the beauty that then begins to help us see God's glory and majesty, his goodness. The artistry of creation says that God himself is an artist in his very essence, and that to me prompts me to worship. Right. And to want to draw closer to that God.
Well, you know, it makes me think of a time when I had a really difficult time just struggling with my faith, and just understanding science apologetics. It seems weird, like I never would have thought that science would have helped me cling to my faith, but it really did. And so I think for those right-brained people, even if we're not compelled to think about science and to look for the Creator there, that we ought to, because it can help us to hold on to that truth that we see also in the record of nature.
Well, you know, the grandeur of creation, the beauty of creation will prompt us to worship, or it should prompt us to worship. But these are also aspects of creation that we can use to make a formal argument for God's existence, kind of combining worship and apologetics. And it's called the argument for God's existence from beauty. And the idea is that a world in which God created would be beautiful. And if we're made in God's image, we should be able to perceive that beauty. But if the world is the product of brute forces and brute reality, and that we're just a product of evolution, then the universe shouldn't be beautiful and we shouldn't perceive beauty. And so this is a way where you can actually bridge the right brain and the left brain
Yeah,
together
definitely.
with science, right?
Well, thank you for that. And then one last point, when you mentioned about just bridging that gap, it brings me to this other lyric. It says, if the stars were made to worship, so will I. So I think it's just beautiful to think of creation and what we learn from it, that it should motivate us to worship.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for that, Fuz. If you want to hear more from Fuz, you can visit reasons.org and check out his blog, The Cell's Design.